All right, everybody. So we're going to start up a little study of the Reformation, religious wars, next week or two here. We're going to start off looking at the Reformation and kind of how it gets started. We're going to do a review here to kind of start off here. So first off, Reformation, a reform. In this case, we're reforming the church in Europe, and in reforming, we make a brand new one. Now that's what causes this whole dealio. Okay. Quick review. We have all this stuff happening with the church in the 14th and 15th centuries. We have things like the Babylonian captivity. We have the Great Schism, where we have multiple popes. We have the conciliar movement, where people want to get rid of the pope and have more of a council to make decisions instead of one person. You have lots of church corruption going on. We have the simony, which is sale of offices. Kind of, fundamental numbers I'll throw out here. The pope sold 24 offices, like abbot and bishop and cardinal, in 1487, with no distinction of what qualifications were and that kind of stuff going on. You have people getting a lot more offices. So you might have somebody who's a priest and an abbot and a bishop and a cardinal, and they get multiple jobs, so you can get lots of money out of it. The church is selling indulgences, so a piece of paper that say, "Hey, your sins are forgiven because you bought a piece of paper," kind of thing, and it helps to refill the church treasury. You have a sale of church relics. You buying bloods on possession of the saints, pieces of the cross for forgiveness of sins. You would take a pilgrimage to Rome and you would kiss the steps that Jesus walked up and down. All that kind of stuff happened in terms of church relics. There's nepotism, where the church gave offices to families. So, like, Leo X and Clement VII were both Medici's. They gave their sons jobs. All the different popes gave their relatives and sons and grandsons different jobs, that kind of stuff. And you have Pope Alexander VI, Rodrigo Borgia, who, had all his affairs and fathered illegitimate children. Something like 20% of priests are keeping concubines and prostitutes and all that kind of stuff in the 15th century. There's some stuff going on here, okay, this time. Erasmus brought up the idea of clerical ignorance in terms of the priests were illiterate. They could not read Latin, let alone local languages, and yet they were teaching the word, right? And telling people this is what it's all about. So, right, all these questions are coming up with the church. Lots of corruption is happening. Now, where our story is going to start is going to be in the whole Roman Empire, loosely ruled by the Habsburgs. So, all these little different states that are here. Okay, you can see these different little examples of states and that kind of stuff throughout this area. You have a variety of states that are found within the Holy Roman Empire. You have little princely states, so those are basically little independent city states run by a prince. You have the ecclesiastical states, so you have bishops and abbotries essentially ruled by the Catholic Church, ruled by a church official. It's not supposed to be hereditary, but pretty much is. You have these free states, so basically it's kind of like Italian city states, if you will, same kind of style. About 50 of those that are in here, where it's the free state dominates that life in terms of the commercial people. You also have still at this point imperial knights, so all these little nobles who have their little chunk of land, and recognize the emperor as their leader, almost in kind of a feudal system going on yet. So this is where this whole thing's happening. All right, the Habsburgs were elected as the Holy Roman Emperor, crowned by the Pope. It's kind of hereditary. It wasn't supposed to be, but it pretty much was. Does that make sense? Um, you know, the person was elected by this committee of four princes and three archbishops, but it was always a Habsburg. Okay, and so there's some messed up stuff going on with that. Okay, really, the emperor had to make everybody happy, so they remained weak. Machiavelli would not have liked this guy, right? So lots of states' rights went to these little kingdoms and groups and that kind of stuff to make sure they stayed happy, didn't revolt, didn't take over the whole Roman Emperor. We're starting with Maximilian, who kind of one of the first emperors we're going to talk about here. He really tried to, centralize power, but didn't do it well. He couldn't centralize in like a Machiavellian sense, so he did it through marriage. He tried to marry his kids off to add land and kind of link up all of his stuff. So, like, he married Mary of Burgundy. Their son married Joanna of Philip and of the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella. They united the HRE in Spain and kind of and made that land a lot bigger and supposed to be, in theory, a lot stronger. Here's Charles V or Charles I, where we talked to. He's Charles V in Holy Roman Empire, Charles I in Spain, who, basically ruled Europe in this quote unquote universal monarchy because he ruled Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, Netherlands, all that kind of stuff. He did a lot of stuff to kind of tick people off. He actually got mad at Rome one point and sacked Rome. He went down, just raided Rome in 1524, I think it was, raided Rome because he could with mercenaries. He supposedly had the first ever empire that covered from sea to shining sea, as far as sun sets, because he basically ran Europe. And really, it was a really expensive empire to run because he was trying to cover all area and make it happen. Um, Hence why he had to sack Rome. But he tried to centralize it a little bit, unite it to a degree. He kind of hung with the Netherlands for the most part. Fought out with Francis I, and there would be a series of wars, the Habsburgs and the French fight, and that kind of stuff. Eventually, when he dies, or when he's older, he actually split the whole empire in two parts, right? So he has his son, Philip II, this dude here in the awesome tights, who gets control of Spain. He'll later on fight with Elizabeth I. That's a whole nother story. His brother over here, Ferdinand II, got the HRE. The main idea is that the main idea they want to focus in terms of Reformation is that they want to keep these areas Catholic and they try to keep Catholicism happen in all areas. Enter our humanist guys from last group. And what you're trying to think, how could humanists like our bro Erasmus here, right, have led the Reformation? You thinking about it? Good, sweet. A lot of humanists, so like Erasmus and Vala, they were big textual analysis people, right? So Erasmus, he read the Greek text of the Bible and published a Greek Bible text. Vala, the donation of Constantine. So they're reading these old original parts of the Bible and being like, hey, what's changed? What's the church not doing right now? Okay, and they actually questioned the church and said, is what the church teaching the right stuff? There was issues of secularism, individualism, right? Individualism was the biggest thing because the individual people were saying, hey, all stuff with the church, should we really take these moral abuses? Should we accept the moral abuses? And should we just take it as we have been? A lot of people really did a lot with this. So we'll talk about Erling Zwingli later on, who was a Swiss humanist, and he actually used Erasmus' Greek Bible, okay? John Calvin we'll talk about later on. He was inspired by a lot of Erasmus' writings. Martin Luther, actually, a lot of humanists turned the old monasteries in Germany into schools, and he let that happen. So there we pot this. So let's get this Luther guy, and he's kind of the biggest guy we're going to talk about a lot here. So he was originally a monk from Germany, in the area of Wittenberg, or Wittenberg, if you will. And he was actually son of a pretty prominent family. Actually started being a lawyer. He was actually in school to be a lawyer, and as the legend goes, if you will, okay, he was stuck in this really bad thunderstorm. He hearing at the tree, lightning's flashing around. He's like, God, oh God, if you save me tonight, I'll become a monk. He lived, he became a monk. And so he got rid of his law career, right, to become a monk. Now, think about it, though. He's a lawyer. He knows the law. He knows how to argue, debate, all that kind of stuff. So that's going to play a role here, okay? As he's a monk doing teaching, all that kind of stuff, he sees Johann, or John Tetzel, we'll read his stuff later on, selling indulgences outside his church. And he has this little phrase he would say, a coin the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs. Purgatory was kind of that middle area between dying and heaven. You had to get your sins, that kind of stuff, and he would be selling indulgences to get people out of this purgatory. The church needed money. Pope Leo X was spending all this money buying art and all that kind of stuff. They need to rebuild St. Peter's Cathedral, and so trying to make money. Luther saw this indulgences and was like, yo, something ain't right here. There's something wrong. And we start seeing him start thinking and stuff. And what he does after kind of reading and debating and thinking all kind of stuff, he writes these 95 Theses in 1517. Basically criticizing indulgences. He's questioning papal authority that they can grant things like, where in the Bible does it say this works? Now, there's a legend that he goes and he nails these 95 Theses to the church door. Probably didn't happen, right? Probably was just a, story or whatever. Well, the big thing that happens is that these 95 Theses, right, they get translated. He wrote them in Latin because he was a monk, right? Monks write in Latin, that kind of stuff. But these theses got translated into German. Some of the printers in Germany with Gutenberg's press got a hold of them and started printing them and handing them out to everybody. And everybody who reads German could then read them. And now this whole idea is spread like wildfire throughout Germany. It's like, going viral, if you will, okay? In terms of a tweet or an Instagram post or that kind of stuff, all right? And so people start reading this stuff and eventually gets to Rome, gets to the Pope. And the Pope essentially doesn't see this as a political issue. He sees it more as a theological issue. He's like, you know what? People have questioned theology before. People have questioned, what's with the church. Basically, just tells Luther to quit. He's like, dude, give it up. Not know your role. Get it, okay? Luther doesn't quit. And so, actually, Elector Frederick III, he's one of the main 7 electors that selects the Holy Roman Emperor, actually protects him as castle because there's threats on his life. Um, and essentially, Luther goes from not only reforming the church and making a new one, he's actually debating people, questioning these ideas of, what is, the right things in the church. He's debating guys like Johann Eck, who are some of the big people in the Catholic Church in that in the German areas, okay? And so he's debating people is kind of like a this big challenging kind of thing, right? He's basically debating, arguing, saying, hey, here's what's going wrong, challenging a church. The big thing he does that ticks the church off is he questions the infallibility of the Pope and the fact that priests don't sin. He's like, yeah, that's bullcrap. Everybody sins, okay? And he basically says the church screwed up when they executed Jan Hus. And that was a point of no return. At that point, Luther is actually excommunicated from the church, and we'll get to that in a second here, okay? In 1520, when this whole thing's going on, he publishes his Theology of Reform. And it says the only things you need to be saved are faith alone, not good works, okay? The Bible's the sole authority, not people or priests or that kind of stuff. There's no church hierarchy, right? Okay, no pope, cardinals, whatever. Just everyone's equal, okay? Indulgences, simony are not right. And basically wanted the princes of Germany, a guy with people who are ruining these little cities, little areas, to reform their churches and make that happen. He also said you don't need to have all these strict rules and ways of doing things like Erasmus made fun of, right? You didn't need the poverty, chastity, obedience. You didn't need to do that kind of stuff. In fact, Luther, after he breaks his church away, marries a former nun. He actually had a lot of former monks and priests marrying former nuns. He also grew a pretty sweet beard. Anyway, as part of this, Pope Leo X and his hit this point of no return, he excommunicates Martin Luther, literally kicks him out of the church. When he's given the papal bull, the piece of paper that says you're excommunicated, Luther chucks the thing in the fire. All right, whatever, you know what I mean? You can definitely tell it's kind of this point of no return where Luther's going to. There was an actual political tribunal then. Obviously, Charles V wants to try and keep the HRE as a Catholic nation, if you will, okay? And he has this diet, or his debate, if you will, his trial at the city of Worms in 1521. And so he gets there and he asks Luther, he says, you need to recant, you need to recant, you need to recant. And Luther refuses to recant. At that point, they pass with the Edict of Worms, where this idea of Luther is branded as a heretic, he's outlawed, he's told he's not a very good person, all that kind of good stuff, okay? And Frederick III, Lecter again, has to kidnap Luther, keep him in his castle so he's not killed by the HRE. At this point, he actually sits down for a while and translates the Bible into German. It had never been translated in Germany before. So now you have this idea of a vernacular Bible in Germany, which can then be mass printed on the printing presses, and we're off, right? In 1530, there's a man named Philip Melanchthon, who's a friend of Luther, okay? He tries to make this compromise, right? Between Catholics and Lutheran. They kind of get together and kind of talk about this, and they kind of print this confessions that he writes. That's supposed to be a compromise, a way to try and get between the two groups of Luther and the Catholics. And this compromise that he makes basically becomes the tenet of the Lutheran belief, okay? The idea of faith alone, scripture alone, and no hierarchy. And it becomes a really big issue in terms of kind of this tenet belief for the Lutheran Church. Luther really starts spreading after that. We'll talk about why it spreads in class. Especially in the northern German states, especially, and a lot of it was actually political because the German states had to pay taxes. They had to pay tithes to the church. Well, when the German princes became Lutheran, no more taxes. Boom, done. Denmark, Sweden became Lutheran, but really didn't spread much beyond there. But there were issues that took place from there. Charles V really wanted to keep places Catholic. And so he actually had basically an inquisition happening in the German states to kind of get rid of this heresy going on. But unfortunately for Charles, he really couldn't push it too much because he had other problems. He had the Ottoman Empire, the Turks invading Hungary. He was fighting wars with France, and because he was so distracted by that kind of stuff, Protestantism is spreading, Luther is spreading, and in class we're looking at some documents for Luther on Monday. We're going to stop there for you guys. We'll get into the peasant revolts and how Luther's becomes a big deal after that more in class and study some of his documents like Luther's writings and the Confession of Augsburg, all that kind of good stuff. Thanks a lot, guys. Make sure it's done for Monday. I'll see you all in class.